Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Khorasan, the Caliph and the Corruptor. Today we're going to discuss the orphans from Surah al-Kahf. So in Surah al-Kahf, there is the story about the one with knowledge who's associated with Khidr alayhi salam, the verdant one, who is the guide for Musa alayhi salam and his assistant, who is often associated with Yusha alayhi salam. So he's guiding them on a very interesting journey. And in this story, there's one part where there is a wall that is breaking down. They're in a town where the people of the town do not treat them well, do not treat them with respect. And so they're not being treated with respect, and then there's a broken wall, and the guide rebuilds the wall. And this confuses Musa. He doesn't understand why the guide would rebuild a wall and not ask anything in return, and they were disrespected. They weren't treated well to begin with. So it seemed very strange to him. And then later, the guide explains to him that there are two orphans who are children of a righteous man, and that there is a treasure underneath this wall that is preserved for them until they are ready. And there's been much speculation about who these orphans are. You know, some people have said it's Nabis Isa and Muhammad, peace be upon both of them. Some people have speculated that it is Muhammad and Ali. May Allah be pleased with them. It's interesting. I've been leaning toward these being perhaps Hassan and Hussein, the descendant of them. That this is related to. This is some evidence of them being in the bloodline of the Imam Mahdi alayhi salam. That there is a reconciliation of the Sunni and the Shia and the bloodlines of Hassan and Hussein within his person. So, and that he will, because he's associated with, he's considered to be, in other hadith, a treasure hunter. He finds ancient scriptures, and he can interpret them in a way that others cannot. He finds things afresh and anew. So perhaps he is able to find what is under the wall, and that these two orphan bloodlines, because in the stories, you know, Ali, he was murdered. And then his wife, Fatima, she died prematurely. And, some among the Shia considered her to have been murdered, or at least to have died, of heartbreak or trauma. It's very controversial, but it is possible to look at Hassan and Hussein as both being orphans from both parents. And there's also that Ali was a righteous man. Fatima, she is a righteous woman. Also, there are the sayings in the hadith where the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said that Hassan and Hussein are considered his sons. And sometimes a grandfather would consider, these are my grandsons. They're my sons on some level. We have the word grand, like a great father. A son, a great son. So Hassan and Hussein, Muhammad had died early, and so we wind up, and some consider him to have been, poisoned, and perhaps that led to his death later on. And so it was like murder over a long span of time. It's hard to know, but this whole orphan consideration is interesting to think with. But something that came to mind the other day that I think is quite interesting is all of us are orphans. Who is our mother and father? Adam and Hawa alayhim salam. They are long gone from our world. We are all orphans in this world. And when we come into our spiritually mature state, then we are the inheritors of Adam and Hawa alayhi salam. And they came from the garden. And when I say they, we could also say we, because we are present within Adam as Hawa was. We are present within his loins, within his genetic structure. All potential humanity is within him. We are all direct descendants of Adam alayhi salam. We are all direct descendants of Hawa as well, but ultimately of Adam. And so he's a righteous man. And so the way I see it is that we were kicked out of the garden. We are in long-term exile. And then collectively, we're going through a Tawbah and Tazkiyah process over a long span of time. And the goal is to be readmitted back into the garden, into the gardens under which rivers flow. Now our body is a garden. Our heart is a garden. We should cultivate our life as a garden. We should cultivate our heart as a garden. But collectively, we are present in this world, and our bodies are gardens under which rivers flow. Sacred living waters flowing through sacred earth. But in a mature state, we realize this and experience it and express it. So what I'm saying is that when you look underneath all the archaeological sites of the world, what is buried underneath these places is our collective human inheritance. Anyone who's out stealing artifacts or destroying artifacts is stealing from our ancestors, is stealing from our descendants, is stealing from our common human treasury. And we have not yet attained our collective maturity as a species. That Isa alayhi salam, he speaks of the harvest that is coming, where there will be a separation of the wheat and the tares. And so it's also interesting that in the book of Revelation, which is a bookend, there are 66 books in the compiled Bible. It begins with Genesis, it ends with Revelation. And it's interesting because at the beginning of Genesis, I've heard some Christians speak a lot about this. In the beginning, in Genesis, Satan is depicted as a serpent. And then at the end in Revelation, he's a full-grown dragon before he's thrown into the lake of fire. So it's kind of interesting. And we see ourselves in the garden at first, and then we're going to re-enter the gardens into, the earth will be made a paradise for us. A paradise, Firdaus, it's a garden. So we enter into a garden state of being, of living. The earth is renewed. It's a new heavens and a new earth. There's a renewal process that takes place as we come into our spiritual maturity and we become rectified and upright, as we are made and we are renewed. So to consider what the wall is, the wall, we could say that which is hidden underneath civilization is the wall. It's also could be seen as bodily. Something within, say, the spinal cord is one way, because we need to read things holistically. So there's always a physiological reading. There's always an outer reading. There's a micro and a macro outer, a macro and a micro inner reading. There's symbolic, there's literal, there's an expansive literal reading where we include linguistic, socio-historical data. We read from many different angles, from many different perspectives, and we always want to have the very best methodologies, old and new. So we revisit old methodologies and we refurbish them, we rework them, we clean them up and retool them so that they're ready for fresh usage in new contexts. So let's just consider that as we cultivate a fresh scholarly apparatus to study the outer signs and the inner signs, because your very body, our bodies are high tech, the highest tech, in fact. We are tremendously high tech, but we're not even appreciating who we are. Like we're still in a state, most of us are in a state of ignorance at this point, and we need to come into a state of self-knowledge, and we need to go into the deepest sajda so that we can stand upright and rectified and made ready. Because right now we are in the Dajjalic era. There is deception and delusion, lies, falsehood all around us and within us that we have to uproot and purify. So we go through the hijra of the heart, the Tawbah and Tazkiyah process to cleanse our bodies, to cleanse our minds in order to be rectified and go from a broken state into a whole state. So Islam, our deen, is holistic and organic. It is ethical and it is pure and purifying. But most have not yet realized this. So may we be among those who have eyes to see, ears to hear, and a heart to feel, know, and understand. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.